Welcome to the second review of Dr. Jordan Peterson's 2017 Biblical Series. In Part 1, I looked at his overall claims about the Judeo-Christian ethic as the basis of Western society, and in this episode I will do a deep dive into his points surrounding the serpent in the Garden of Eden from Genesis 3, and why he is way off base.
And that's also echoed by the intimate relationship between the snake in the Garden of Eden and Satan, which is, we'll go into, because that's a very strange association. It's like this snake also becomes the adversary of being.
Peterson makes several mistaken interpretations in this clip, but let me take them one at a time. The first blatant mistake Peterson makes is associating the serpent with Satan. If you pay attention to the details in the story of the garden, you will note the conspicuous absence of any association between the serpent and Satan in the original. The serpent-Satan synthesis is a much later Christian interpretation that I discuss at the end of this video, but this is a key fact that Peterson studiously ignores, as it would not serve his agenda to be truthful given the interpretation he's trying to impose on this story. But let's stay with why the serpent cannot be Satan in Genesis 3. As I pointed out in the first video of this series, the garden story derives from Tablet 9 of the Epic of Gilgamesh, but Peterson attempts to link it to the redemption of humanity through the sacrifice of Jesus in his fourth episode, a contextual impossibility given the time of the story's creation 2 millennia before the birth of Jesus. So, strike two against Peterson's supposed psychological significance of this story. Ignoring the original Sumerian context for now and just focusing on the Hebrew story, the serpent could not have been Satan because the character of Satan had only morphed into an independent being in a single passage of the Hebrew Bible at the very end of the Jewish ordering of books where Chronicles is last, not Malachi. Satan then continues his evolution in the apocalyptic literature of the Jews in the intertestamental period from approximately 150 BCE to 50 CE to be picked up in the New Testament. Therefore, as there was no concept of Satan in early Hebrew theology when the garden story was incorporated, Satan could not be the serpent, as Satan as an independent being would not yet evolve for several more centuries. Strike three, but he still makes more mistakes. Going back to the Sumerian origins of the garden narrative, Peterson neglects to discuss the context in which the serpent is not evil and the female is a goddess. From other segments in his series, it is clear that Peterson is fully aware of the Sumerian origins of many biblical stories. See his episode 7 at the 51-minute, 50-second mark for an example, linked in this video's description, and yet never once does he make this point to the audience. Given his knowledge of the Sumerian background of this and other stories, I can only surmise that Peterson is lying by omission in order to hype his heavily Christianized perspective and portray a highly flawed interpretation to his audience, the members of which the majority will be unaware of his contextual errors and clear bias, and take him at his word. Instead, Peterson claims, the snake also becomes the adversary of being, and in episode 4 he launches into an explanation of why predation by snakes on early humans was the choice for the serpent as metaphor, completely overlooking the positive imagery of serpents in ancient Eastern cultures from which this story originally derived.
The snake's eternally associated with the tree. Well, the snake was eternally associated with the tree. We spent, God only knows how many tens of millions of years as tree-dwelling primates. And the primary, or one of our primary predators, we had 3 primary predators: snakes, birds, cats. And so the snake has been associated with the tree for a very, very long time. And the lesson the snake tells people is, you bloody well better wake up, or something you don't like will get you.
Further, Peterson has no way of knowing what the author of the original tale in the Epic of Gilgamesh was thinking, or what their inspiration was over 4,000 years ago. Imposing both a Darwinian and a modern psychological interpretation onto an ancient story, and one filtered through a Christianized lens, is manifestly absurd. This now brings us to the point Peterson conveniently ignored: when, where, and why the association of the serpent with Satan actually arises, because, as demonstrated, it did not happen in Genesis 3, as he asserts in the opening clip. The only way to make this association is to make a backward attribution, and that is precisely what happened at the very end of the New Testament. In these, the only 2 verses in the entire Bible to make this connection. In Part 4 of Peterson's series on Adam and Eve, where he delved into the biblical metaphors in the Genesis 3 story, he again omits all of the contextual basis for the serpent, and never mentions that the story derives from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Further, he does not explicitly state that there is no association with Satan in the Hebrew Bible, just a passing mention that Christians did it, stating, "That's why the bloody Christians associated the snake in the Garden of Eden with Satan," with zero reference to the passage he is citing. Understanding where and why this association happened in the book of Revelation is the key to understanding the contextual nature of these associations. Revelation, in its entirety, is a veiled political slam at the Romans, and the letter is openly directed to Christian communities being persecuted in modern-day Turkey. The context of why the author of Revelation made the association is important, as it was merely symbolic code for the in-group's understanding, and the use of satanic epithets was commonly used as a rhetorical weapon by first-century Jews and Jewish Christians, just as Paul made use of the term. Of course, all of this contextual history is conveniently omitted by Peterson in order that he might convey the psychological significance of the story of the serpent, as he perceives it to be. If you like my content, please like and subscribe to get notified of new videos. Please also consider supporting my work by becoming a Patreon sponsor. You can also find me on the following platforms: